Our two learning goals for the day are, first, I can classify polynomials by degree and number of terms. That's really just going to be some vocabulary that we'll go through. And the second part is I can add or subtract polynomials. We'll start with that first learning goal. So let's just start with what a polynomial is. A polynomial, whoops, sorry about that. A polynomial can have constants, variables, exponents, and they can be combined using addition, subtraction, or multiplication. If you need to, pause that for a second and write that down, and then we'll go through some examples and some non-examples. Some examples are, if you even have a constant, for example, 5 is considered a polynomial. Or if you have a variable by itself, it's also considered a polynomial. Or if you have constants and variables multiplied together, for example, 6xy. Okay, that's considered a polynomial. You can also have exponents, right? 6x squared is a polynomial. You can also take these different expressions and add them together. So for example, 5 plus 2x, that's considered a polynomial. It's a combination of numbers and variables using addition and subtraction. You could have this. Okay, that's another example of a polynomial. So polynomials are just taking numbers and constants, numbers, and variables, and you're multiplying, adding, subtracting. You can also do here's some non-examples. Things you can't have is we do not divide by a variable. If you have an x or a y or any variable in the bottom of the fraction, is not considered a polynomial. That means no negative exponents. 2x to the negative 1. If you remember from when we talked about exponents, you can move that to the bottom of the fraction. So we don't allow negative exponents. No radicals, 5 squared of x plus 2x. Because of that square root of x, that would not be considered a polynomial. No fraction exponents. So I don't know, 3x squared plus 2x to the 1/2. That would not be considered a polynomial because of that 1/2 power. So polynomials are pretty boring, which actually makes things good, kind of nice for us. But you're just looking for numbers, variables, combinations that you're adding, subtracting. But we're not going to talk about radicals or half powers or negative powers. All that stuff we did in that last unit. For now, we're going to kind of leave behind there. Degree of a polynomial. So to find the degree of the polynomial, and we'll talk about the leading coefficient also, you look at each term separately. Terms are things separated by pluses or minuses. So this one only has one term, one. This one has 3 terms. This one has 3 terms. And this one has 2 terms. So you look at each term separately, and you add up all the exponents of their variables. So for example, 5x to the first only has one variable, and that's x. So the degree is 1. For 6, there is no variable. When there is no variable, we say it's degree 0. For the 5x squared, right, it only has one variable. The highest power is 2, so it would be degree 2. So these are the degrees down here. 2a cubed b squared. Okay, so if you look at those, we got 2 variables now. We add the exponents of the variable, so 3 plus 2 is 5. So that 2a cubed b squared we do consider to be degree 5. If you have more than one term, like these bottom 3 examples, this is 5x to the first and 3, you take the degree of each one. So that first one's degree 1, 3 is degree 0. And for the whole thing, we take the highest one. So since the highest one is 1, we say it's degree 1. This first term would be degree 5, second term degree 2, third term degree 1. We take the highest one, so it would come out to be 5. This third one, right, degree 1, degree 3, degree 2, we take the highest one, so that would be degree 3. Leading coefficients. So leading coefficients are the numbers. Coefficient is a number in front of a variable. So for example, 5 is a coefficient, 5, 2, 6, -2, 4, those are all coefficients. The leading coefficient is the one in front of the highest power. So for example, right now, x to the first is the highest power, the highest degree. That would be the leading coefficient. On this one, x to the fifth is again the highest power. So if there's nothing in front of it, it's a 1. That would be my leading coefficient. This last one, you got to be careful. The 6 comes first, but the one with the highest power is the x cubed. So this and the minus goes with it. So the -2 we would consider to be the leading coefficient. It's the number in front of the variable with the highest power, which was a cube right there. Okay, so that's degree. and leading coefficient. We can take these polynomials and we can name them, and there's two ways to name them. We can name them using by their degree or by the number of terms. So I'm going to go through this vocabulary. I would just watch, and then when I'm done, you can pause it and you can write all of these different terms down. So if you look at the first one, I've got -4. That's degree 0. So I'm going to put over here, it's degree 0. Whenever it's degree 0, we name it a constant. A constant is a number without a variable. Well, if it doesn't have a variable, it's degree 0. Okay, this one, that's degree 1. So degree 1, we call it linear. You may remember back to when you learned about linear equations, like y equals mx plus b. When it's in that form, it's always x to the first power, so we call it degree 1 linear. Okay, this one, it's degree 2. The highest power is a 2. We call that quadratic. This one, again, is degree 2. It's the highest one, so it's also a quadratic. This last one, the highest power is a 3, so we call it a cubic. It's degree 3, so we call it a cubic. If you get anything bigger, like if you get a degree 4, then just call it degree 4, or degree 5, degree 5. I only want you to know the names up to a cubic. Okay, that's one way to describe it. The other way to describe it is by the number of terms. So this one just has one term. If it has one term, we call it a monomial. The prefix mon is for 1. If it's got, this next one's got 2 terms, right? The 2x and the 3. 2, the prefix for 2 is bi, so it's a binomial. This is a binomial again, right? 2 terms. This one's got 3 terms. That's a trinomial. And the last one also has 3 terms, so it's a trinomial. So if you need to pause that for a second, just remember the prefix mon means 1, so 1 term, bi 2 terms, tri 3 terms. By the way, the prefix polynomial, poly means many. So poly includes all of them. It includes something with 1 terms, 2 terms, 100 terms. All of them are polynomials. So kind of think of those prefixes. Hopefully, you've probably seen those before and you're already somewhat familiar with them. What we're going to do then is just practice classifying a polynomial. So I'm going to start with that 3b squared. So the way we classify is by degree first. So there's only 1 term. The highest power is 2, so it's a degree 2. That means it's a quadratic. And it's got 1 term, so we say it's a quadratic monomial. Monomial because it has 1 term. Hey, let's also write these in standard form. We haven't talked about standard form, but standard form is when you start with the highest power, and you just write it in order from the highest power to the lowest. So highest degree to the lowest. So on this one, this 5b to the 4th is a higher power, a higher degree than the 6b to the 3rd. So if I'm writing in standard form, I start with the 5b to the 4th. 6. So that's the same expression. This is just written in standard form. Okay, we would call this one, it's degree 4. We didn't have a name, right? The highest power is 4. We didn't have a name for degree 4, so we're just going to leave it as degree 4. It has 2 terms. 2 terms are referred to as binomials. So degree 4 binomial. Let's do a couple others. Okay, so let's take that top one. Let's first write it in standard form. So the highest power is the -8x to the 3rd. I'm going to put that first. Next is the x squared. Next is the 10x. Next is the -5. Okay, so the name of now that's in standard form. By degree, the highest is a 3. We'd call it a cubic. Number of terms, it's got 4 terms, so we just call it a 4-term cubic. We don't have a special name for it. Okay, if I come down here, this one's degree 0, this one's degree 1. So I'm going to put the degree 1 first. When you switch them around, make sure the signs go with them. It's -3k, so it's a -3k. It's a -4, so it's a -4. Okay, the highest power is 1, so it's degree 1. We call that linear. So it's linear, and then it's got 2 terms, so it's a binomial. Okay, last thing you need to know is to put it in standard form, you want to make sure you combine like terms. Like terms is this. Any terms that have the same variable with the same exponent is considered to be like terms. To combine them, you add coefficients and variables and exponents, but you add the coefficients, but the variables and exponents stay the same. I'm going to show you an example of this, but first pause it and add these to your notes, and then I'll give you an example. So if you had this, if I had 5x squared plus 3x minus 10x squared plus 7. If I asked you to write that in standard form and classify it, just like we did before, the first thing we're going to do is combine like terms. So sorry the 10 didn't turn out good there. My board's being funny, but we'll try again. There we go. 10x squared. So 5x squared and 10x squared are like terms. That means I can combine them, right? I can add or subtract them. I add the coefficient or the number in front. So I have to go 5 minus 10. 5 minus 10 is a negative 5. The x squared never changes. You do not change the variable and exponent when you're combining like terms. So just be negative 5x squared. That's those two combined together, 5 minus 10. The 3x does not have anything that's like terms, so it just stays the same. The 7 does not have anything that's like terms, so it just stays the same. Okay, so now it's in standard form. All we're going to do now is classify it by degree. The highest power is a 2. So we say it's degree 2, which means it's a quadratic. And it's got 3 terms, which means it's a trinomial. Excuse the bell there. So before you go before you decide if it's in standard, before you put it in standard form, make sure you've combined all the like terms. Then start with your highest power and work your way down. When you're done with that, then you're going to name it by the degree and by the number of terms. What I'm going to do is the second half of the assignment, which is adding and subtracting polynomials, I'm going to save that, and we're going to do that separately as a separate video here. So I'm going to stop this one. You can do the first half of the assignment, and then we'll have a video with the second half of the assignment there. Thanks, guys.